In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God.
Amen.
Today, June 29th, we commemorate the holy apostles Peter and Paul. And they are the patron saints of our whole patriarchate. The Church of Antioch reverences these two together as the patrons. And the patronal icon shows them standing erect with the model of a church being held between them. And then sometimes you'll see Christ or angels above them or something, but the focus of the icon is Peter and Paul standing erect, holding the church in their hands. And it's obvious why. We read in the Acts of the Apostles how they were both in Antioch actually for several years at the beginning of Christianity. It's through their efforts that the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. And it's also the place where they had their most public falling out over do non-Jews have to become Jews first before they can become Christians. And notice that even though there was a great contention, it was bad enough that they had to go back to Jerusalem to meet with all the disciples, all the apostles, and figure this out, that it wasn't about their own egos, right? There wasn't a faction of Peter. There wasn't a faction of Paul. Because these guys, being closest to Christ and having direct revelations, knew that it wasn't about them or their successors. It was about Jesus. It's still about Jesus. When we come here today, we are trying to put ourselves into the same place that Peter and Paul put themselves, devoting our lives to Christ. Now, these two men also had the blessing that they had specific revelations that they passed down to us. We just heard about the one from St. Paul. He's caught up into third heaven, into paradise. And notice he doesn't tell us really anything more about that other than he heard things uttered there that speech can't be uttered about. You can't talk about the things. You have to experience those things. It's not for words, okay? And you often wonder, Christ came, he set up the church, he did all these wonderful things, and yet he didn't write a thing down. Not a thing. And I think Christ knew, and I think Paul knew when he's speaking of this experience, as soon as you start writing some of this stuff down, it's immediately subject to misinterpretation. And so then we come back to today's gospel. Probably the most fought about short little passage in the whole gospel of any of the gospels. Who do you say I am? The Son of God. Upon this rock I'll build my church. So is Jesus Christ, who set everything up so that, remember, he's the focus. Peter and Paul knows that he's the focus, and yet Christ is somehow saying, no, this one guy over here, born of a woman, will be the focus. No. The focus is on, I'm the Son of God, come down from heaven for you and for your salvation. Get over the, whatever it is, the envy, the pride, the other things that want us, the egotism, that want us to say, I'm really more special than you are. And even when Peter and Paul fought, neither one of them said that. They had a real issue they had to resolve. But neither one of them was saying, you've got to do this because I'm Peter. Or you have to do this because I'm Paul. I've had this great vision on the road to Damascus. That was not part of it. And so even today, that's not part of it. And if you're blinded by that, if you have to hold on to something there for your own egotism, then you're falling short. Jesus Christ came, and yes, he gave special visions to these two men. But throughout history, other people have had special visions. It's not just limited to these two men only. But they were the foundation. They were able to provide things for us so that we can continue. And Peter wrote only 2 epistles. Paul wrote a bunch. I forget the number. But if you look at the total number of writings, Paul's the most prolific writer in the New Testament. But Peter gave us 2 very important epistles. And among the things that he wrote us is things like Scripture's not subject to private interpretation. Very important point as we keep in mind when we study the Scriptures. It's not up to me to decide what this means. And another thing he talked about was the hidden person of the heart. So the whole Christian life is to focus on this hidden person of the heart, to wake that person up, to make him be aligned with God, so that hidden person in your heart can say, you are the Son of God. Come into this world. And what's the purpose of waking up this hidden person in our heart? St. Peter in his other epistle talks about we should become partakers of the divine nature. And so it's not two separate things, really. You can't wake up the hidden person of your heart and not partake of the divine nature, because that is where God meets us. And the Greeks have a word for it that's really not translatable, the nous. That's the hidden person of your heart, your nous. And it's the highest part of the soul, some people say. Sometimes it's translated intellect, which is very poor translation, especially after the rationalism of the 17th and 18th century. It doesn't mean the same thing now that it meant then. So the nous, the hidden person of your heart, needs to wake up. Your nous is called to be called up into the third heaven with St. Paul. It's called to have the vision of a sheep coming down from heaven and saying, whatever I have made, you can't call bad. So Peter and Paul, they're the foundation. But they're not the only salvation. They're not the chief cornerstone. The chief cornerstone being Jesus Christ. And it's upon him that we build our church. Not Peter, not Paul, even though we honor them and laud them into the ages of ages. They're not our God. But we're Christ's people. And through them, we can find the divine nature that Christ calls us to partake of. Through the prayers of our Holy Father, through Jesus Christ our God, have mercy upon us and save us. Amen.